Many of my videos take a while to produce. This is a quickie, which is why you're seeing my face instead of what I normally do for certified human effort. I want to talk about the results of a creativity test researchers administered to ChatGPT 4. I'm going to frame this out a bit below, so don't take the headline I'm about to read too seriously. The test taken by the chatbot was the Torrance test of creative thinking, or the TTCT. The study showed that ChatGPT performed in the top 1%. In other words, compared to a given sample of college students, GPT-4 was in the highest percentile possible. The viral headline is reading AI outperforms humans in creativity tests. I'm quoting here from the University of Montana website. The study was directed by Dr. Eric Gusick, an assistant clinical professor in University of Montana's College of Business. He and his partners used the Torrance test for creative thinking, a well-known tool used for decades to assess creativity. So, methodology. Basically, the professor submitted ChatGPT 4 responses to the question prompts as well as a control group of 24 other students to Scholastic, the organization in charge of the testing, for grading. Scholastic was not aware that the responses were AI generated, so it compared them to 2,700 students who took the same test in 2017. There's a lot of hype around these test results, but we should really sit back a moment and think about those results, the test, and creativity itself. As an educator of gifted and talented students, I've heard and worked with TTCT before, and as with any test designed around gauging creativity, it isn't without flaws. I want to note these flaws have been noted for some time because this test has been around for nearly 50 years. I am also summarizing a 2022 post on the russellwarren.com website that describes the test. Basically, the way the test works is by measuring three factors: fluency, originality, and flexibility. A prompt is given. The participant generates as many responses as they can for the given prompt in an allocated time. And the responses are graded. They are graded on how many responses there are, what the test calls fluency, how different the responses are from each other, what the test calls originality, and how many different categories the responses represent, what the test calls flexibility. So, the test defines creativity as being able to generate a lot of unique ideas that are categorically diverse. To simplify, let's say it gives you 3 minutes to name things that fly. Naming 100 birds gives you a lower score than naming 20 birds, 20 bats, 10 types of airplanes, 10 helicopters, 20 flying fireworks, and 20 flying superheroes. So you can already see a huge cultural bias in the test. Those who've been exposed to a nurturing environment with lots of examples of things flying will score better on that type of question. Not to say that there are not individual differences in creativity. Take two brothers raised in the same environment with the same exposure, and one names 20 birds and the other names 20 entirely different types of flying things. The second is moving through different categories, meaning their brain is connecting more disparate ideas. We consider that a trait of creativity. Creativity is sort of a rejection of the rigidity of sticking to one self-contained category. Quoting University of Montana again, the results place ChatGPT in elite company for creativity. The AI application was in the top percentile for fluency, the ability to generate a large volume of ideas, and for originality, the ability to come up with new ideas. The AI slipped a bit to the 97th percentile for flexibility, the ability to generate different types and categories of ideas. For flexibility, the ability to generate different types and categories of ideas. Be that as it may, Knowing this, we can guess why ChatGPT scored so well on the test. It's a computer program. It works faster than people. It would be like me representing that a calculator programmed to go through the timetables was better at math than a fourth grader. The calculator can work faster, but that doesn't mean it has the potential to someday tackle trigonometry. By framing creativity in terms of fluency, which is just being fast, originality, which in terms of AI models is just training from diverse sources, and flexibility, which is again training from diverse sources. That simplifies creativity into something the machine can excel at. The University of Montana article mentions that Gusick had some expectations that ChatGPT would be good at creating a lot of ideas, fluency, because that's what generative AI does. Now, is that a sign that the AI is developing creativity which exceeds human ability? As Gusick seems to conclude, no. I think it shows a flaw in our test of creativity and maybe even our definition of creativity, and it does so on a test that's been thoroughly criticized for decades for its overemphasis on the quantity of responses generated in a time trial. Again, quoting from Russell Warren's November 2022 post, there are statistical problems with TTCT scoring system. Most important is the confounding influence of fluency. The other scores are reliant on fluency because the number of unique responses, originality, and detailed responses, elaboration, will always be dependent on the number of valid responses, fluency. This artificially inflates correlation among TTCT subscores. He goes on, this confounding effect of fluency on TTCT scores is well known, but I do not believe that its importance is fully understood outside of the circle of creativity researchers. This is important because Dr. Gusick took a system that is particularly good at generating long lists of information and tested it against a metric known to overemphasize the quantity of responses inputted into it. As Gusick himself said, we were very careful at the conference not to interpret the data very much. We just presented the results. It also emphasizes original responses. The test results showed that GPT listed ideas that other students generally wouldn't, but here's the thing. ChatGPT isn't a student, let alone a human. It isn't like a particularly creative person breaking out of the box. It was never in the box. It might be in a box, but not the same box we are in. It doesn't search through its childhood memories of all the things that it's seen flying, most of which were birds and airplanes and superheroes. The TCT evaluates candidate responses by referencing a subject's peer group. College students are not ChatGPT's peer cohort. It has no peer cohort because it's not human. I think subjecting ChatGPT to this testing is intellectually sloppy. While we can pragmatically state that ChatGPT is capable of scoring within top percentiles relative to human subjects, this is again like saying calculators are good at math. It arrives at anticipated answers, but it lacks comprehension. It cross-references data sets and compiles a response according to the likelihood that that response meets criteria it's been trained on. That's the opposite of creativity. It's regurgitation. It happens to regurgitate copious responses, many of which meet our criteria, but that doesn't mean it's creative. That means this measure within our system of evaluating creativity, and likely our definition of creativity itself, is flawed in that it allows a subject which does not comprehend the subject matter it's being tested on to outperform those who presumably do. I want to end with a quote from Dr. Gusick that I think is both telling and somewhat ironic. If that's the word. He and his research partners asked ChatGPT about what it would mean if it had scored well on the TTCT. And in his own words, Dr. Gussick says, ChatGPT told us we may not fully understand human creativity. It also suggested we may need more sophisticated assessment tools that can differentiate between human and AI generated ideas. End quote. I think the real lesson we can take from this study is that when an uncomprehending AI chatbot reminds you the results of your test may be invalid, maybe you should believe it.